fine. Great. So it's good to see you,
Great
and
to see you too.
we're back again. Therapist times filmmaker analyzing a movie, and I think it's going to become our tradition. So for whoever is listening, if you want us to analyze something that's just coming out, or you are interested in, maybe we could do something like that. And tonight we are here to talk about Wicked. And I think I'm going to give it over to you to just set the scene and to explain why are we interested in this movie, what is it steering for us, so that we really want to spend some time on it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very excited to talk about this movie because I have absolutely loved it. And I've been really, really like enchanted by this story since I first saw it in London in 2013 when I was here on an exchange just for like an English language course. And it was the first West End show I've seen. And I'm so glad that the filmmakers kind of gave justice to the musical and even upgraded it in a way. So yeah, I've prepped a little, just tiny history of kind of the timeline because this is an interesting piece that was kind of transformed through a lot of different medias. So first there was a novel of Wizard of Oz in the year 1900, so 120, almost 5 years ago. And then it was made into a movie, which was one of the first movies in color, one of the most magical uses of color in the film in 1939, the movie Wizard of Oz. And then there's the big break, and there's the novel Wicked, written in the year 1995 by Gregory Maguire. And I read a bit about his inspiration for this piece, and he said that he was really interested in kind of the origin of evil. And he was wondering if someone as a child is constantly called evil, could it become a self-fulfilling prophecy? And that was kind of the first inkling of inspiration he said he had. So he wanted to explore this nature of evil because there was a case in the 90s in London when he was living in London that really made him wonder um, how how it happens, the nurture nature, and whose yeah, from whose perspective does someone become evil and how early on. And then this fantastic book gets adapted to a musical, but a theatrical musical in 2003. And the musical book is written by Winnie Holtzman, who now joined again to write the film. So that is really good because you can really see that the film is very, very faithful to the musical adaptation. And the music and lyrics for this theatrical musical, are made by the legendary Stephen Schwartz, who wrote and composed a music for Pocahontas, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Prince of Egypt, so many magical, magical soundtracks, and then later Enchanted. So he was kind of in this Disney DreamWorks animated universe, but also wrote music for this fantastic piece. Um, so he said that his music was inspired by the beginning of the musical is inspired again by the public perception of Elphaba. So the Wicked starts with the Switches theme, no one mourns the Wicked, and it's a public perception of Elphaba, and he kind of wanted to send the message, beware, there's someone, we're gonna tell a story about someone really evil, but then obviously set very false expectations for the audience. And then I really loved what he said about defying gravity as well, but I'm gonna leave that for a bit later in our conversation because I thought it's just beautiful. So now in year 2024, we get a film Wicked. written by, as we mentioned, Winnie, and Dana, who also wrote Cruella, which is another um, kind of villain gets their own perspective story. And she wrote How to Be Single, which is more in the rom-com territory. And she directed an episode of New Girl, which is also quite nice. So more kind of light-hearted faces, but very thought through. And the man who directed this film is John M. Chu, who directed Step Up. So very different kind of like hip hoppy world, but knows his musicals. Then Crazy Rich Asians, which he claims is very personal to him, and In the Heights. So he's very much in the musical world and knows how to set the scene. So yeah, that's kind of the brief history of this fantastic piece.
Mm. And actually, that's let's maybe start there because that's how we started a little bit as well the newsletter and the small post we wrote. And I think this song "No One Mourns the Wicked" is very poignant. I think only if we spend this whole conversation talking about that song and what it means, it could be a 1 hour conversation. But I would like to add from my perspective, and I don't now know the writer, but my friend and therapist Anna Perovic, she often talks about this book on evil, um, and actually that our own capacity to dehumanize someone, and by dehumanizing another person or an animal, being able to really think and act in really horrible and abusive ways. And I feel like somehow that dehumanization and numbing to other people's suffering really is making us always this close to being alphaba.
Mm.
And but it's much easier to kind of ease that intrapsychic tension and completely project that part of us into someone that we are labeling as evil. So
Yeah.
my deep belief is that whenever each of us somehow starts to own a part of themselves that has the capacity to dehumanize, to desensitize,
Mm.
a lot of the times we would be able to really have much less polarization societally. So I don't know how does this song speak to you, and what does it do for you, this opening. But and another thing is, as we other someone, as we label them as different or wicked, it's much easier to then do all kind of atrocities to them. So I think that's something that for me is a really incredibly important entrance, because it sets the scene to how we operate as human beings.
Yeah, that's so nicely put. I don't know what to add to it, but I think it's just such a smart beginning. It's really smart to introduce Elphaba as a character without her even being there,
Yeah.
and through this celebration about her, which she later mentions, and kind of predicts, but in a different way. Uh, yeah, celebrating her death. And I know the first impression is when you hear those lyrics, "No one mourns the wicked," you're like, oh, you're taken aback a little bit because it's just that horrible wording that you can't. I don't know. I felt instantly uncomfortable, especially with the like happiest colors and dancing, and the production designer has actually convinced the production to plant 9,000 tulips for the beginning
So
of this
that's
film.
real.
It's a real field. I've
Oh wow.
done some research on it. So this like amazing grand opening of joy and color, and then juxtaposed with these lyrics that are just horrible and, as you say, very inhumane. Um, so yeah, it's fantastic. I completely agree with you, and I'm sorry that we as society need to constantly be reminded that people are not just evil and good. I guess we've had so many like centuries of stories where characters have been in their boxes,
Yeah.
and villains have been only villains, and they're villains, they deserve all the worst, they deserve to be, I don't know, Ursula's living in a cave on her own with you know, they deserve to have these weird outcasted lives. That's the perception we've had so far. So to me, it's really interesting that this is one of the first pieces that kind of pokes our eye and says, wait a minute, you don't know everyone's story. And just because someone's labeled as wicked or evil, it doesn't mean that that's actually a fact.
Yeah. And actually, this is something I want to speak about, the psychology of the mob, and also a group process, because we often, when we talk about therapy, we talk about personal therapy, and it's a very small system. It's much easier to control, and also we are a different person in a dyad than we are and become in a group. And also our families are groups where we take certain roles, and basically the more someone gets stuck in the role, the more they start to act as if that's who they are, without really having the ability to um, transform themselves into something different. And I think this is a really important thing to speak about, because the if a societal system is organized like the one in Wicked, in a narcissistic way, where there is a ruler who is not questioned, then actually everything is in the service of that. And on top of that, people's jobs are not to change and shift. It is to keep the system as it is,
Mm,
and therefore to keep the roles as they are, because a shift in the system would mean potentially a shift in power, because there is a potential shift in needs of the system. So I think that's something that is a really poignant thing that this movie brings, that not many other movies are bringing, because they are kind of absolved of the societal context. But this movie really much, we talked about this in the newsletter and between us, it's almost like there are two characters. One is Elphaba's timeline, and then the other one is the societal systemic view of how is this society, invented society, operating, what are its ways of working. And I think it's a very poignant, how do you say, system example of a narcissistically ruled system.
that's so
Yeah.
interesting. I've never heard that expression of a narcissistic system, but I guess would be very close to a dictatorship in a way.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's I like what you said, because as if there's no changes in society, then there's no progress. Just it kind of one plus one makes two. So yeah, it is interesting. It's just kind of everyone's role is to keep it as it is, stick in their little boxes, and Elphaba gets born green. So she basically doesn't even, it's not by choice that she is making change. It's by birth that she's forced to, she's just different. She's a change herself. And others' perception of her like makes her immediately feel unwelcomed, and by that she then helps some other beings that are unwelcomed in this system. It's yeah, such a smart base. But what you said about families and our roles in families is really good. It's a good kind of introduction to our character of Elphaba and how which roles does she take, being rejected from birth. So she is basically being abandoned, but then once her younger sister gets gets born, she takes over this role of her protector and maybe even her parent, because the mother is not alive anymore. So that's really, it's kind of tragic. It's like they thought, oh, okay, this child could actually, this weird child could actually be useful, but only in service of the younger sister. So yeah,
Hmm.
I wanted to hear your thoughts about this.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I think that's another really important point to pause and talk about, because I feel um, uh, being born different in some way, and it different can be as for her skin color, even for her sister who is different, and she is treated also even by the father as incapable
Mm,
of taking care of herself. It just immediately limits your scope, because it's almost like when people are talking about special needs, it's needs. It's not special needs. It's different needs. They're not
yeah.
special, but they're special only if we put someone as a norm and then compare to that.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah.
so so I think in that sense, it's that it's a thing that when you cannot hide from your difference. So a lot of us have the privilege to hide from our differences and mask, and maybe kind of shape shift into being able to fit in the norm, whatever the norm in this current historical time we live in is. But then Wicked or Alphaba, and if we talk about really how it is made in the movie, it also insinuates an underlying racial difference. So we can talk about people of color. There is really no choice which part of their identity is going to lead even before they open their mouth.
Yeah.
And I think that's very visible. But another thing about here, which you mentioned, is that alphabet is something which we call parentified child. So child that hasn't had their needs recognized, their needs validated, and it's almost is a child that has always needed to take care of themselves and afterwards of others.
Mm,
So it's basically someone who has a gaping hole for connection, and it's something that you can see in her in the way. And I always say in my seminars, the more the harder the childhood, the bigger the idealization of the childhood is. And
mm,
so she basically thinks about, oh, only, and a lot of children like this, they create fantasies. Only if I meet the wizard, this will be taken away. This pain that I'm carrying, this gaping hole that exists, it will be taken away. And so this kind of fantasies that are created from that place of deprivation of love is something that we are seeing in Wicked. Because basically what she's born into is constantly being told that she needs to change her entire being. It's
yeah.
her being that's wrong, and not her behavior or parts of her behavior. And when you're born with this belief that your whole core being is wrong, which is basically shame, it's almost like you're walking through the world to constantly prove that that's not the case.
Yeah.
And
Which
you
is
can see,
how, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but which is how she introduces herself to the others.
yes,
It's like immediately, no, I didn't eat grass. No, I forgot what are these, the three
yeah,
things she says. But it's three like very kind of defensive explanations of her uniqueness.
greenness, yeah.
Yeah, greenness. And the only person that recognizes this as being defensive and kind of greets it with a bit of humor and humanity is Fiero, which is interesting when he bumps into her in the woods.
Yeah, yeah, and in a way, I think that's as we are going along to see kind of the progression of her character. In a way, it is that really uh, crushing shame that is basically bringing her to the point that she doesn't really, she has a very still a fierce part of herself that that actually in a way allows her much more to individuate than Glinda, because she has almost by constantly being different, she doesn't mind to stay different. And it is that
Exactly.
rebellious part that saved her that suddenly becomes the part that actually saves her from the shackles of shame, which actually, if we think about Glinda, is much less available.
Yeah.
So in a way, a part of her that, as we discussed in the newsletter and the between us, the part of her that she feels at first the most shameful, suddenly at the end really becomes her greatest strength. And that's what we normally see in therapy, is when people come to us, they often come with the idea like all these things are wrong about me, and often towards the end of the therapy they come to realize, oh my god, these are my most precious gifts. And I think that's
Mm.
the shift that we are slowly seeing in Elphaba's character over the progression of the movie. But maybe we could like introduce Glinda now and just speak a little bit about her and how they kind of overlap. And
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to just add that often, so we talked about this role that she took over from home and from her small environment. Also, um, she is from a privileged family. Her father is governor, I think,
yeah,
mayor, governor, I forgot,
yeah,
but some really important position of authority. So I think that she growing up with him who doesn't love her, doesn't expect her, doesn't accept her, she has the expectation of if I do this great thing in the Emerald City, I'll be accepted by my family as well, by my small town folk as well, and there will be that celebration. That's what you talked about. I want another thought occurred to me, and that is that there is this theory of the Wizard of Oz, the novel being about populism and monetization, kind of difference between the yellow brick road being gold and then the Emerald City being the dollar, money. So I was thinking we could even translate it as, yeah, if I become great and powerful, and if this wasn't Oz but was London, for example, if I become rich and in a great position, then my family will be proud of me. And
yeah.
then all of these, yeah.
Actually, before you continue, another thing which I want to add from family constellations is that when we as a system try to repress something, it really has a way of coming back in the system, because the system knows that it's not in a balance. And I think that that's another thing. So in the glossary of narcissistic relationships and systems, what's happening with Alphaba is called scapegoating, is when we take the our most hated characteristics and we project them on one person in the group, because we want to absolve ourselves from the guilt that we feel for being, you name it, being slightly jealous or slightly evil or slightly imperfect. And then we kind of absolve ourselves from that intrapsychic tension by kind of completely projecting that part on someone else so that they carry it for us. And as I was preparing for this, actually scapegoating was a tradition in Greek mythology, where people were offering a goat, so that that goat carries away the sins of the group.
Wow.
So in a way, I think true liberation societally really is about us kind of owning our shadows and not projecting them outwardly. And the more we can hold those polarities, the more we are going to be able societally to avoid conflicts, because we can really own our own sharpness, our own ruthlessness, our own shrewdness, and not really say, oh, you know, I would never do that kind of thing.
Yeah. Which is
Um,
why I think this story is very popular with the LGBTQ plus society as well. It's kind of like how they got rejected through history as being something shameful, and because people were afraid of it in themselves. And so yeah, it's quite an important story um, for their representation as well.
I mean, actually, I was listening yesterday. I will share after this a really incredible short clip from Alok. And they are speaking about being an artist is saying, I don't want your projections.
Mm.
And not only that I don't want them, I also don't need to tolerate them. And I think this is, it's a very incredible video. And he said, art for me is liberating my imagination from their ideology.
Wow.
And I thought that was absolutely incredible, and I think that's also what's going on in the movie. And I think our all of our liberations lies, we're all born into narcissistic totalitarian systems in a way. I don't think any one of us had an experience of like real freedom in that sense. I think we're still striving to create these kind of liberal societies. And I think the more we're cleaning ourselves from the inside and liberate ourselves from the inside, I think the more we will be going towards building a society that's liberated. And in that sense, I feel like um, this is a story of internal liberation, of intrapsychic liberation from oppression, which I find quite fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And it's it's again very parallel to what's happening in Belgrade currently
Exactly.
and in the world in general. But yeah, to go back to so Elphaba's role in her family gets completely challenged in this new university, which is similar to, you know, like leaving your parents' home and actually finding yourself without those circumstances and without that role within your family is always very interesting and just kind of opens your eyes in so many different ways. Um,
And
and
sorry, if
her,
I can add
yeah,
to that, that is exactly when our role, familiar or familial roles are challenged, because suddenly we are in a different system where we start to realize, oh, like I'm used to one way of being, and suddenly I
what's my
am,
role here? Yeah.
yes, exactly. Sorry,
How do I fit in here?
yeah.
No, no, that's it's a great it actually helps me phrase it yeah, in a simpler way. What is Elphaba's role there? She expects, of course, she's gonna be her sister's protector, but her sister doesn't want that protection at all anymore. She wants to she expected to have her complete independence, and then she's kind of forced to share this space with Elphaba again. But it all happens because someone, for the first time in Elphaba's life, recognizes her power and her uniqueness and her amazing talent, and that is and frames what she thought, as you said, is her biggest flaw, like her inability to control this surge of emotion. Um, frames it as a talent, as magic, as something good. And she, for the first time, gets this special, uh, how would you say, treatment, special treatment in a positive way from the director of the school, from the head teacher, played by Michelle Yeoh.
Yeah.
So that challenges her thought that she's dangerous. The professor even tells her, I will teach you to do good, which is what I think Elphaba's always wanted to do, and you will meet the wizard, which was planted as Elphaba's biggest wish in the beginning.
Hmm. And actually, I wanna talk here about. I wouldn't be the best one to explain this, but I think this is what Jung talks about as the process of individuation. And I think in this way, Alphaba has something which I've spoken about on my profile, but it's called the golden shadow, which is when all our best qualities are in cast in the shadow, and the only thing is available for us to see about ourselves is all the bad stuff.
Mm.
So often that this can be the case, and so sometimes we project our best qualities onto others and leave the worst for ourselves. And I think that's partially part of Elphaba's journey. And another thing that I wanted to add here is the part of the journey where she's told that if she learns to harness her emotions, she is going to be able to
Do
lean
good.
into the power that she has. And I think this is really a path of recognizing our personal power, which is to trust what we feel to guide us to where we need to be, and to really surrender to the role that is given to us. That is not something we can control, but at least we can, the more we feel, the less that is going to control
Mm.
us and the more choice we have.
And it's a
And
great, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but it's a great comparison to Frozen and Elsa, who has this big fear of her own power as well. And interestingly, is played by the same actress that plays Elphaba in the original Broadway
okay.
production. Yeah, it's Idina Menzel plays both Elsa and Elphaba. And it's a very similar character when you think about it.
Yes.
But the point of this character is, as you say, if you not to suppress and repress your feelings, because then it will go out when you your power will go out in ways you can't control and the ways you don't want it to go out.
Mhm.
Which could be like anger management or some you will be you're much more competent to say in which ways that happens. But yeah, once they learn to love themselves and trust their emotions is when they can actually control their magic.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think this is basically what we've been talking also even for the previous movie, but I think what I have been talking on the profile for the last few weeks, and I find it extremely funny because it matches my personal process, the process I'm going with, the people I'm working with, and suddenly there is this movie that synchronistically is coming out. So I think it's very funny how something big is happening energetically in our society now, and I think we're all feeling it.
Mm. And
I
Wicked
think.
is so multi-layered that I think, like, if we watch it in 5 years or if we watched it 10 years ago, we would feel a similar thing probably, and we could find a comparison to something that we're going through and that the world is going through.
And I think I want to add here something you wrote in the original post, which is once you open your eyes to some of these things, it's something that you cannot unsee anymore. And I think both characters, or actually I would say all characters in the movie, are just changed by the meeting that they are having in between themselves, and they're changed to the point that they can't go back.
Mm.
So it's really a growing up piece as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a coming of age. And now is maybe the perfect time to go back to Glinda, because she is exactly the person that fit this society in the most perfect way she could. She was born fitting into it perfectly. She says, "I'm you're perfect to Fiero." He says, "You're perfect to her." She goes, as you said, she acts as the society expects her. She goes for this prince, most handsome guy right away. She goes for the Miss Marbles kind of. She wants to have the lessons. It doesn't happen for her, but she thinks she expects it. It belongs to her. All of these things belong to her. And then when she meets Elphaba, and through their really complex and beautiful like story of beautiful and cruel in both ways, story of friendship, she gets to the point of not being able to play that role anymore, even though she does keep on playing it, but you can just say, as you said, she's completely changed from within and not being able to believe in that role anymore. She needs to keep playing it, but not believe in it.
And I think for her, so if we are going to talk about societally, she is the norm. She is the right race, if you want, the right color.
Yeah.
Um, she's entitled to things. But one thing that she's not, and you can see that's the pain of her character, which is not visible, but it's there, which is um, she is almost someone who needs to fit in an image. And if you think about it, she doesn't really know what she likes. She goes for the things that are popular. So she goes for the things that, if you want to be popular, those are the things you do. But I don't know if she ever had the chance to really ask herself, what is it that she wants to do beyond what is kind of offered. So I think a really important thing you wrote, I think, is also she's the typical um, female split, which I'm also
Mm.
seeing. We were discussing this in our dinner, which I'm also seeing in how even female babies that are just kind of coming into the world now are being told, oh, I'm going to have a female baby, she's going to be so gentle. Or, if like it's all these stories that are being told while the baby is even in the womb. But it's already born into an
Yeah.
idea of you will be gentle, you will be fragile, you will be needed to be taken care of, and
Mm.
the only thing that you are defined by is the perfect man that sees you. And I think that's also visible a little bit in the movie, is that somehow she is only visible when she's associated to the guy. and
Yeah.
and it's also it's just this constant role playing, but she really doesn't. It's almost like she exists only in the male gaze, not as herself, as her own personality.
Yeah, I understand. I think her wishes are connected to when she says my biggest secret is we're gonna get married. And
Yeah.
so I think
Yes.
her wishes, her ambitions are connected to the men, but I think that she does just on her own have this presence that's immediately the queen bee, and the most kind of listen to interesting person in the school for all of the other students.
Yeah.
So I would just disagree slightly there, because I think she thinks she's special on her own, but then her biggest ambition, and which is what's engraved in women for centuries, for their biggest ambition to be who will they marry and how will that marriage then transform their lives forever into being secondary.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think in that sense it's but I think you wrote one really important thing about her, that she's perseverant,
Mm.
and that has characteristics that you could develop. So it's almost like, and we need to, when we were discussing this, we need to also step back to remind ourselves that these are coming of age, really young people. So all of them are still developing and based on their experiencing, deciding who are they going to be. So I think it's really important for her to be given like a benefit of a doubt,
Yeah.
but also on the other hand, and we can see that once she has the experience, it does touch her and something changes in her. Once they have the dance, and we will talk about this, I think, now.
Yeah.
But then I think society is still stronger,
Mm.
and her privileges and wanting to keep her privileges become stronger. Therefore, she kind of denies the allyship to Glinda, and comes back and falls back to the to the false safety and false sense of security to that by belonging to the system she thinks she has.
Yeah, oh, this is maybe the most like the things that touches me the most. So, um, the friendship being formed, that scene is beautiful. But what you just made me think about is the moment of decision after the defying gravity, after the glasses have been taken down. Fin glasses don't exist anymore. This dream isn't a dream. Elphaba says, I don't want it. I can't want it anymore, knowing the circumstances. And then I am still not sure if Glenda wanted to join her. It was such a dance in the song Defying Gravity of Elphaba, you're silly, you're delusional, you need to take the role that you've been offered. Um, and then actually, the two of us have enough power, knowing that this ruler is actually powerless now. The two of us have enough power, and we bounce off each other's power in such a good way, that we could make this change. And I think Linda does realize it and is very close to saying yes. And I think in the film, she even leaps off onto the broom, even though the song kind of foreshadows that Glinda will stay and I hope you're happy was a farewell in a way. So I think she did in the end want to join Alpha Binders, but then gets captured and brought back, kind of the society harnesses her back into her role. Um,
Into submission, basically. Into
yeah.
submit. She's told by Elphaba, you grovel in submission to feed your own ambition.
Mm,
Mm.
wow. Yeah. How did you how did you perceive this moment
Mm.
um of Glinda's decision if she's joining Elphaba or not?
Yeah.
Glinda's kind of possible redemption um being taken from her.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to say about that. It feels very
Mm,
disappointing. Also, um, knowing how it feels to be the bearer of the things that people don't want to look at, and how lonely that place
yeah.
is, and how many times, even for myself, I needed to say, I still trust my truth, regardless of the fact that someone would tell me, you're delusional, this makes no sense, why are you fighting this lost battle? Kind of come back with me, it will be easier, it's an easier road. Um, I I've learned to know that different people have different destinies, and that some people may be more useful societally within the system.
Mm,
And I mean, I know from the musical, I don't know how they are going to do the film, but
yeah.
in a way, she does eventually turn back.
Yeah,
um, I don't know
exactly
how
as you
they will
said.
develop that, but maybe that allyship in some way is important. And I think for maybe for big changes, there is the right timing. And people, I think everyone needs to have the freedom to make that decision for themselves. It is still hard to make any meaning of that moment, because I feel like it's a very complex. I mean, in a way, if we think that this is a representation of a totalitarian system, it's a very complex decision that I think a lot of us need to make for ourselves, I feel.
Oh yeah, and I'm just gonna go back to Stephen Schwartz, the composer, because this is the moment I wanted to talk about. And he said when he wrote Defying Gravity, hey, I'm not that good in music, but he wrote the mm, kind of the discussion. I hope you're happy. I hope you're happy now. It's all like the notes that don't really, that don't create harmony and don't match each other. So it's like a fighting even musically. And then when the moment of unlimited, together we are unlimited comes, it uses the same seven notes from Somewhere Over the Rainbow. So it's an homage to Summer Over the Rainbow, which is the ultimate kind of, it's the anthem of hope for a better tomorrow. So in this anthem of hope, she finds her unlimited power and also shares with Glinda that together they have this unlimited power, precisely because of their very opposing skills and talents. But that, yeah, that kind of fit in together. So I thought that's just so brilliant. um
And I think the two of them, which something you've mentioned in the text, is the two of them are also almost like the female psyche split, where one is carrying the gentle, the good girl phenotype, if you want, and the other one is carrying the integrity, the ruthlessness, the perseverance, the
Yeah.
um, cunningness, and I like the book Vital Spark, who talks about these outlaw energies for women. But I think they kind of act out this split, but they can't fully act it out because once they've met each other, they've exchanged, and therefore they've taken something from each other in that exchange, I think.
Definitely. And I'm sorry I jumped to the ending song, so I wanted to ask you if you wanted to mention any of the previous moments, because there is a lot to say about the Wizard of Oz himself, who can't be as redeemed as Glinda, who is still teenager in a way. The Wizard of Oz very well chose his path.
Exactly. I mean, I would like to go back slightly, even slightly further back to the dance
Yes,
scene, which I think to me is a very poignant scene in the sense that it's where we see how much borrowing some of our privilege can change someone's life and normalize what's being thought as difference and
mm,
completely unacceptable. And I think this is something I believe a lot of us need, who are in positions of privilege and power, always need to keep in mind, because it's often by just standing close to someone and really, I think that's what I wrote in the newsletter. Is what she did is what we normally do in therapy, is we join our clients in their movement, and in this way Elphaba was not alone for the very first time in her experience, and you could see her tears. You could see how she, I think, felt seen and met for the very first time. And for the very first time, she didn't need to be and dance someone else's dance. And it's almost like when that happens, when we meet someone when they where they are, suddenly both we become horizontal. Um,
yeah. I also noticed that that choreography starts from the stomach. They put their
ah,
hands on their stomachs,
yes,
and
yes,
it's like it's kind of like from our guts, from our beings, our grounding. We, as you say, match each other, we connect to each other, and then we have the little it's kind of like blinking,
Mm.
maybe. I think the choreography there is just so well thought through. And it really, it was a long scene. I remember watching it the first time and thinking, this is going, like, they're taking their time with this dance.
Mm.
And it was without music in the first time she does it, which makes us even cringe a little bit, because she's doing this weird dance and you're like, no, Elphaba, why do like, you're different already. Why are you now making it even worse? That's
Mm.
kind of the feeling you get, which is horrible that you get this
Yeah,
feeling,
it's
but that's what I
like
got.
shame
Mm.
transfer. We are feeling the
Yeah.
shame she feels. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But she took this role, as we said, of being different and being horrible. So she's owning it in her own way. And Fiero says it's incredible. Like, people don't. She doesn't care what people think, and Glinda says no, she does. This is just kind of, it's her defense mechanism, and yeah, her way of functioning. So then she approaches her, and it becomes, as you say, this really, really touching moment where Glinda, who's someone who's a trendsetter and isn't someone who would usually maybe copy someone's moves, and she completely just leans into it. And she leans into it, we can't forget, because she received this unexpected generous kindness from Elphaba, who she thought is her arch nemesis. um and she probably didn't experience that kindness before, kindness that she, for the first time, maybe thinks she doesn't deserve, she didn't expect, she's not entitled to, and it gets given to her. So it's beautiful. Yeah, I love that. Might be my favorite scene of the movie.
Yeah, yeah. And I think what happens afterwards, and then that's where I think the Glinda character gets muffled, I think, when she
Mm.
tries to make her popular. And I think there is one moment where is again I felt very therapeutic for Elphaba, and that's where I feel I always felt it's just so important when we know we're in position of power to really remind ourselves how much our words impact another person. There is a in the I think it's the sex education series, when this girl she's going she's right she, who wants to be a writer, one of the main characters, and the guy really kind of slams down her
Yeah,
her
essay,
essay.
or
Yeah, and then
I
she
think it was
comes and
novel,
yeah,
actually, like a
yes,
novel
yeah.
sample.
Yeah, and then she comes and she tells him, you know, I wanted to let you know your words have power. I went back to the people that care about me and they reminded me of who I am, and I'm not going to allow your words to define my worth, but some people's soul might be crushed because of this. And I think this is something that I really feel we all need to keep in mind, because once we are in these positions, and no matter where we are in the social hierarchy, there will always be someone who is less privileged than us.
Mm.
And I think we always need to hold that in our awareness. And I feel it's so important to really know that our words have impact, they create worlds, and to kind of constantly clean ourselves from the inside out, so that we really kind of know that we don't use those kind of vocabularies for ourselves and then therefore for others. And I think there was this one moment which for me therapeutically is beautiful, is when Glinda explains, sorry, when Elphaba explains why she thinks she is guilty for her sister's accident, or not accident, but what happened with her.
With her mother, like
Yes,
she blames herself for the death of her mother and
yes,
the her sister's legs not being able to grow up as
yes, yeah. And then Glinda says, Elfie, that might be what you've learned to believe, but that doesn't need to be the truth. And I think this sentence, I think, opens up so much, because a lot of us live our lives as if the conclusions that we made when we were 2, 3, 4 years old are the truth of the world. And it's so important to really re question this in safe spaces where people are going to help us reframe them and realize that, and that is a childhood narcissism in a different way from the narcissism that we are talking, because
interesting.
a child does think that everything revolves around them. Therefore my mother's misery is my fault, therefore my sister's misery is my
Mm.
fault. So that is just the other side of childhood narcissism. So there is narcissism that goes into shame, and there is narcissism that goes into rage, but they are basically coming from the very similar source, which is, I'm small. For me, it is evolutionarily beneficial that I think that everything revolves around me, because if I truly feel my helplessness and my smallness, I will feel overwhelmed by how everyone has more power than me.
Mm.
So children do have a delusion of power that we all grow out of, and some don't.
Wow.
And I think this is really what, when we talk about the the wizard, he has stayed in the delusion of power, because for his psyche to really feel how small, weak, and potentially unprotected he was, which we don't know his origin story, might be crushing. And therefore he needs to build all these massive systems to maintain this illusion that he is powerful. And even Elphaba, she eventually, there is a sentence in the movie. By the way, we didn't say that there will be all spoiler alerts. We are going to
I
say
hope
everything,
people realize.
but uh, but I think that there is that poignant, that really important moment. I'm using the word poignant tonight. I don't know why. I like the word,
It's the word
but
of the
there is a,
night.
yeah, but there is like this really beautiful moment when she goes to him and she says, "This is why you need all these things. You don't have real power." And I think this is where, once we realize that, and I think that's what's happening in Serbia in the moment, and I think in several other places in the world, is once we realize that, other people really start to feel their own power. They become empowered, and then they realize shame needs to change sides. These feelings that I've been carrying for you, I don't want them anymore. They're not mine anymore.
Yeah, it's a fantastic plot twist. There is actually a film about the Wizard of Oz himself and his story of coming into Oz, and it resembles El Dorado story a little bit. It's like he's been he's a human as well, like Dorothy. And he kind of drops into Oz and is immediately believed to be in El Dorado, a god, and in Oz, a wizard. And as you say, then he kind of needs to keep up this illusion. And in this movie, he's played by James Franco. It's an okay movie. I don't remember it very well. I need to revisit it because it belongs to this universe. But he was a magician, so he is used to faking magic in a way, and being an inventor, which comes with its own skills as well. Like there, that shouldn't be look down at, but yeah, he creates this whole system just to, yeah, to keep this illusion for the people to maintain this role.
And that's
And
another thing.
yeah,
All of these extreme roles which we are seeing are actually somewhat needs of the people, because needs of the bigger group. And
mm,
then some members of the group take those extremes, because sometimes don't we all need just this idea that there is magic, and this some of these really hard experiences are just going to disappear, and they will be magically taken away by an amazing show and Christmas lights.
yeah,
um, and
or
all
a savior, Oz.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So I think all of them are basically parts of our psyches as well. We need them to survive, to go forward. But I think when they become extreme, obviously they become problematic.
Yeah, and
In
then
a way.
that brings us to another societal need in a way. What the wizard thinks is that they need a good enemy to stay united. And this was a really interesting line to make because I never thought about it that way. But he basically, again, to maintain this rule, which is it's being maintained by we say by sapom y kanapom. It's like I don't know
Yeah.
how you would say that, like with really with not a lot of yeah, not very competently. Like it can't be maintained for much longer. Is what we is
Yes.
the impression we're getting. So he needs to create a diversion. He creates a diversion, which is the enemy, and he blames the most first. It's interesting to me. It's animals that we immediately empathize a lot for, and then also it's animals that were humanized, which is an interesting concept in itself. But also, it's animals who have founded a university, so it's intellectuals and academics that get blamed in this society and in this country.
And I mean, isn't this what we're going through in the world, where we
Um,
can really see that competence, and in a post-truth era, is also something that's been seen as almost a threat,
yeah,
and
exactly.
and it's not validated, and it's all often shown how not validated it is by how much it's paid. I think if you can see even in Serbia, like really where, doctors, nurses, engineers, architects, it's people who really have the competence to do something that often are paid
Yeah.
less than all the meta structures that are built around the actual competence.
Yeah, no, true. And it's maybe maybe they are his biggest threat. They are his biggest threat because they are the ones that can look through his mask and
Yes.
through this um illusion he's created.
Mm.
So in a way it is a smart move from his side, but it is an evil move.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when it comes to animals, there is the sentence that they should be seen and not heard. And I mean, I think it again comes to complete dehumanization. And if we think about history of slavery, is the way slaves were treated, or even less than animals, basically, and less than human. And therefore, they should be seen and not heard, and not have opinions, and not have wishes, and not have values. And someone actually asked us to analyze the movie Wish, the Disney movie.
Oh, that's
It is also about it's also about the narcissistic leader, and in a way how this leader suppresses the wishes and the individuality of everyone else, because everything becomes in service of them. It's a system which, almost when I was drawing it in my group therapy training, it's a system where you have one personality and everyone is turning towards them, whereas
mm,
an interconnected system is where you have multiple players and they're all communicating with each other in different ways. And I feel like that kind of fluid society is something we can strive for. But what a lot of us has lived through is this system where we're looking at this one authority hierarchical figure and everything is in service of what they want and need to do.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I think that resembles quite a lot the experience of anyone who is different. In I think in the U.S. and in the U.K. history, it's people of color, but in the history of Germany, it was whoever was decided to be othered. It was Jewish,
Sure. Yeah.
but I think we are doing that all the time in different ways. And I want to add one more thing here about Glinda. And I think that's where when we become the norm, because she's saying, first, you can never be popular like me. And second, she basically goes to change alphabet to be like her. And I think that's the place where then she completely starts to miss her
Mm.
because it's basically she is trying to make her more like herself,
Yeah.
because that's the norm. And I
Yeah.
think this is a trap that a lot of us also falls, because it's what's familiar, it's what we know about, and therefore we just want it to be easy for us, and therefore people to make it easier for us because we have been born into privilege, and so we don't really need to change much because we are the norm.
Mm.
So I think that was a very sad moment for me to see,
Yeah.
because you could see that feeling of, oh, so you're really not interested in the person's experience, because once you're trying to help, and Elphaba says you're trying to help a person you don't know with skills you don't have.
Yeah.
And I think the important thing there is really to remember that if we're doing that, that's abuse, that's not help. The only way one can truly support someone is by asking, what is it that you need and what's your current experience? And really being at the level and at meeting them at where they are. And I think that's such an important thing for helpers, but I think if we are friends, if we are lovers, if really trying to tell someone what they need is a way of completely missing their experience and not
Mm.
getting to know them.
Yeah, that is so true. And in writing, it's often that characters know what they want and it's set what they want, but they find out what they need through the journey of the film, of the story. Um, so I think here as well, our characters find out what they need after the big kind of revelation. And I think what's interesting in this scene is that it wasn't a typical makeover scene. We often have these makeover scenes where our atypical character gets then turned into the norm, and that's like, whoa, they can be beautiful,
Mhm.
you know? But here it didn't work
Yeah.
because she's green. And no matter what she tries to, and because she's unique in her own way, but whatever she tries to, mm, however she tries to put her in the norm, it doesn't work. And that's fantastic. That's, as you say, Alphaba's biggest quality in the end. And in the end, she just gives her flower. And I think, I hope, I want to perceive this way, that Glinda furthermore gives up on changing Elphaba and
Mm.
just accepts her as she is, and yeah, her stops her white savior ways of helping.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think one character we didn't touch on is Piero.
Yes,
So I didn't even hear the song until you named it, until you said,
dancing
oh,
to
like
life.
dancing through life. And I was like, oh, wow, that is sometimes what you see, that it's like this kind of careless because I can do careless life. So I would like you to say something about him as well.
Yeah, no, he's a really interesting character to me, and I think, as you've mentioned when we talked, his character arc will be complete in the second part of this film, so we can't judge him completely based on this first part. But he his theme song being Dancing Through Life is just saying so much, especially because he's been expelled from all these schools, but he doesn't have any consequences from these bad actions that he's done, because he just gets put in another fantastic school and doesn't realize what privilege it is to be in that environment, to learn from these people, as much as Elphaba does, for example, who wasn't even supposed to study there. So that whole choreography of him ruining the library and disrupting everyone's learning process, and kind of in almost like a John Travolta Grease way, forming a group of popular people and making them not learn anymore. I feel like I get an impression that Shiz is a place where people come, well, where nerds come, where people that really want to be sorcerers come. So it's good students. So he kind of turns it all around and makes them go to a party, which isn't a bad act in itself, but yeah, we're made to believe it is in this kind of educational system. But he is just like gliding through life, dancing through life without consequences is a really, it looks like a lighthearted song, but it's a really devastating song because it shows us that there are many people that do this and are born with this privilege.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't really need to think about anyone who's more, as the Glinda would say, more unfortunate than him, until the whole little baby lion cub scene where Elphaba, again meeting Elphaba, changes his perception and he realizes that he can can make a change. He doesn't need to take the easy way and just kind of ski through all of the um all of the obstacles that other people are experiencing. He can make a change if he puts a little effort into something.
Mm. And I really like that scene also when when there is this cage with a little cub tiger, and it does remind me, I don't know if someone has watched these scenes where it was the first time they invented chlorine gas in wars, and they were showing that with pigeons in universities. It's I mean, unfortunately, I don't know why I watched them, but I just know that there is a YouTube video of that. And, you know, she says, "Aren't we going to do something?" And I don't remember exactly Glinda's answer, but that's a heartbreaking answer. And I wonder how many times all of us are guilty of this, of seeing an injustice happening and choosing our own comfort.
Yeah.
And I think this is how we get to totalitarian systems. Is I feel like we just think, oh, it's not a big deal, so we choose our own comforts, but actually it becomes a big deal down the line. And I think I wish just that we somehow build this integrity in us, that we call things out much
Mm.
earlier before they become a society-wide problem, because I believe there were many small steps in many totalitarian systems that were visible, but we
Yeah.
didn't do anything to stop them. Again, because we thought it's not going to get that bad, and then it does. And so I
And
feel like,
and
yeah,
yeah, and you don't want to have your own family and your own kind of closest people suffer in any way.
Yeah.
So you choose to roll with it, choose with
Yeah.
yeah, choose to. Sorry, I got a message, so I got distracted. But choose to roll with it and dance as Fiero does so many times.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then I think suddenly Elphaba is, and that's, I think we can maybe kind of wrap it up in that sense, is that Elphaba says, I cannot see this and choose it. And
Yeah,
I feel like then, and that's also the story of Flying Monkeys, on how she's seeing that her magic can be used to really hurt people, and then she chooses not to.
mm,
And also people and animals in the movie. But also I want to introduce the flying monkeys, because I think that's an interesting thing, that's the concept which has it's part of a narcissistic relationship glossary, but it has originated from the Wizard of Oz. And it's even if you think about this, is that it's those people that are dependent on the wizard, that their families are threatened if something
yeah,
happens, and so they perpetuate wizards' goals and ambitions at the cost of the whole system. And I feel like I think this movie really represents all the complexity of the totalitarian or narcissistic societal system, but that can permeate in all levels of society. And I really feel that you can see how everyone is somehow bound, and how much energy it takes to be unlimited, because it's so much energy. If you think, I don't know exactly, I'm not a physicist, but if you calculate how much energy you need to defy gravity,
yeah,
it's a huge energy investment. And somehow I feel, unfortunately, some people are just born into that without having the choice to carry
yeah,
that role or not. And that's what and it's, I've read, there is an incredible article which I really recommend, from Simone, and I think her name is Rashida. Simone Graysoul and
yeah.
Rashida had a really great course on
You
allyship.
sent it to me.
And she do, and she's a person of color, and she says, I don't want to have to defy gravity. It's exhausting. And I think, but it's almost like a space where there's very little choice. The only thing you can choose is to maybe rest from it sometimes.
Mm,
But there is really no choice if in going further with it. And I feel that's where all of us can take a bit more of that load consciously, so
yeah,
that the person who is born into that doesn't need to carry that load on their own
on
all
their
the
own.
fucking time.
I
Yeah.
agree. No, that's a great
And in a
way
way,
to conclude this
there's,
evening.
although there is hope in that, there is also, I don't know if there is that much hope for people who are constantly defying gravity. And this is what I wrote about. Like glorifying resilience is in a way a form of abuse.
Mm,
It's in a way that says, "Oh, you are so good. You're so
so
amazing.
brave.
What you're doing, so brave." So I don't need to do anything, you know. And it
Mm,
again becomes for our own comfort. And I think I wish that more people had some rest, and less people need to defy gravity, really.
yeah, me too. It's such a beautiful way of describing what people are going through, defying gravity. I really love those two words because we were talking about it and you've mentioned like what it takes to the whole gravitational system of our Earth to go against it and fly. So it, as you say, it takes enormous amount of energy, and it is definitely impossible to do on your own. So we hope that this fictional character of Elphaba will get some help in part two and will inspire helping the world to do the same.
Yeah, and actually, I want to maybe end again inspired with what's going on in Serbia is about people coming together. My supervisor often reminds me of the saying, I'm not sure who of the American presidents said that, or maybe it's not them, but if we don't hang in together, we're going to hang separately. And I
Mm.
think it's such an important thing to really find allies when these big feats are somehow given to us by our paths and our destinies. Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know if you want to add something to this. I feel like we've covered most of the things from the movie, but if there is something we you feel like we missed, and if someone who is listening, I don't know how many people actually stayed with us, but if someone who is listening has a question, we're happy to answer. And yeah, I don't know if you have something to add so that we can slowly
No,
end this.
but I'm happy that people send suggestions, and I would love to analyze Wish as well. And I'm a big lover of Disney, and I was actually on the special presentation of Wish in LA last year while because my film was playing at a festival in LA, and then I went to this other animation festival. So I would love to talk about it. And thank you for listening to this long discussion about Wicked. And thank you, Alexandra, for always bringing so many insights. I really, really stay like your
Mm,
words really stay with me, and I think about them for a long time. And I love
mm.
your insights into all films, and I wish we had more kind of psychology and arts being analyzed together, and art being analyzed through psychology, and art being made with the knowledge of psychology. And so, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and actually that's what I appreciate. I really appreciate your sensitivity and like your real analytical eye because I feel at least I always feel like that I'm growing from these conversations
Oh,
because
yeah, same.
even though I feel like, oh, we wrote the post, we wrote the newsletter, we talked about it, and then this happens and I realize, oh, there is even more layers now that we are having this live discussion.
Yeah.
So I really feel like every time we do this, I kind of grow an inch, and I think it's just so important to have that. And I think this is going to slowly start to live a life of its own. And hopefully, I hope for a live audience so that we can have a bigger discussion.
Definitely, yeah, yeah, to involve more people in it. Thank you. I agree. I grow so much, and thank you for being in my life and wanting to do this. So, yeah.
Likewise. So, just for people, I will put this on YouTube so that you can have a bit of more ability to pace yourself if you want to watch it again, and it's going to stay on my profile. You can find Mimi on Žensky Likovi, and you can see what she has made, and you also follow what she's going to make. And I believe we will have an interview together before the launch of her
The
festival.
festival, yeah, we didn't
Yes.
even introduce it. I mean, I didn't introduce
Yeah.
myself in the beginning, but yeah, it's I'm the head of the Female Characters Film Fest, and I'm excited to have Alexandra on one of the panels and break down a lot of the female characters that were influential in the last cinematic year. So yeah, and if you want to read more about them until then, you can follow the page. I post bilingually, both English and Serbian. So
Mhm. And the festival will be in Serbia in about May, you said?
yeah, yeah, I will update you on the dates
Yeah.
when we have.
So that's something that you can follow. And as far as I'm concerned, I also, because I realized we didn't introduce ourselves.
Yes.
So I will just say that I'm Alex and I'm a PhD in biochemistry and I'm a Gestalt counselor. and I have a private practice, and so I really like all things art, sports, yoga, and well, movies, and therapy. And I really like, on my page, I really like to talk about really liberation from our inner shackles. And I feel like next year I will have some therapy spots open, but what I really am most proud about is I will start doing family constellations
Wow.
monthly. So that's something I'm prepping, which will come into your inboxes this week. And I'm really looking forward for anyone who wants to join me in that. So I just want to then end this. Really, thank you, Mimi, again. Thanks for everyone who stayed with us. Thanks for everyone who joined. And if you have questions, we are always open for further discussions. So questions and comments are always welcome. Thank you.
Bye.